So good morning, everybody. My name is Joe Gleason. I launched my own venture, 111 Consulting, at the end of 2024. But like Dan said, I've been in the area doing technology consulting for the 5.5 years prior to that.
Hang on 1 second, Joe. I got
Yeah.
sort out. Yes.
Who else hit traffic this morning?
Oh, yeah.
I hit way more traffic than I expected. I was nervous I wasn't going to get here in time, but I got here.
Okay. It's good.
All right, so 111 Consulting does small business process consulting. So you might cringe when you hear the word process. Some people do. I spent my entire career in technology, software development, systems implementations. And one of the things that I've really learned over my career is that you got to know what you're doing before you just throw software at it, right? So I'll get into that in a second, but building a business without heroics is what I help small businesses do, right? And I'll kind of tell you what that means in a second. But a little bit about me. So I got lots of pictures of my family up there. One of the reasons I started 111 Consulting was to have flexibility to spend time with my family. I have an 8-year-old, 6-year-old, and a 3-year-old at home. I work out of the office, or out of my home office, so sometimes it's a little chaotic for me at home. And I do work with clients across the country, and so I'm a lot remote, I'm a lot local, but able to do both. But I really started the business for that flexibility, and so I try to really balance my time, like every, I think, founder tries to do, right, until kind of the business grows quite a bit. But like I said, I started my career in technology, so I spent 16 years in higher education, actually. I worked at 2 different universities, the University of New Haven in West Haven for 12 years. And I was really in the right place at the right time there, in that I came in when they were still using a mainframe system, and I was given an opportunity as a software developer to implement a web-based marketing system for the admissions office. And I ended up staying there for 12 years and replacing all the technology on campus there. I became the director of administrative operations, or administrative systems. And really, that's kind of where I cut my teeth in business process. One of the things, one of the early experiences that I had was we were replacing the billing system for the bursar's office. And one of the things my CIO at the time recommended, and the company, we worked with an outside company that helped us implement the software also, recommended doing a business process analysis. Let's not just try to wing it. Let's sit down, understand how the bursar's process works, who's involved in each step, what needs to be done, why. And we literally took a month to sit down and analyze, to diagram, to document. And that's really kind of what I do now. It's interesting to just reflect back on that experience, and it's what kind of propelled me to where I am now. But we went through several systems implementations at the University of New Haven, replacing all of the technology. We actually did the major student information system twice, because we picked a product the first time that was really kind of cutting edge. It was a great product. It was really awesome, but it didn't kind of make it through its sales, and they had to squash the project, so we had to do a whole system implementation over again. The second time, we did it a little bit bigger, so we replaced the student record system, student admission system, billing system. But then the second time, we took in huge human resources, the financial system, payroll, and brought it all in-house into one giant system. So after that, I moved on. I was the CIO at the University of St. Joseph here for 4.5 years in West Hartford. And there, lots of systems improvements, moving to more modern technology, reporting systems, Microsoft 365, we all kind of take for granted now, right? But that kind of came alive over the last 15 years or so. So I mentioned kind of that background more specifically, again, because it's where I kind of cut my teeth. I really enjoyed working in higher ed, really because, in all honesty, we didn't have a lot of resources, so you had to wear a lot of hats, right? And I really enjoyed learning each of the departments' business unit, right? How it works, what they do, and why they do it. And again, it's really kind of got me to where I am today and what I'm doing today. After the University of St. Joseph, I went out of higher ed and went private to a small technology consulting company in Southington, where we did both custom software development and the outsourced managed services like help desk and security and things like that. And they are obviously going from nonprofit higher ed to small private technology consulting company, very different experience, right? Much more fast-paced, but still customer service focused, right? We were very client focused. We built custom software for small business clients. So it was, in my kind of wheelhouse as far as software development and technology implementation. But I really learned and really enjoyed working with small businesses, right? And if all of you are small business owners, right, or you work in a small business, right, there's lots of things to do. There's not enough people to do it. There's not enough time to do it, right? And that's why companies like my former company exist, right? Because we outsource some things to experts. And so I exited that business at the end of 2024, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I thought about getting a job. I thought about staying home for a little while. I took a couple of weeks off, and I got a lot of encouragement. I leaned on my network for advice, and they said, hey, look, you've got all this technology background. You've got this small business experience, right? And you've got a process-oriented mindset. There are small businesses that just have nobody focused on this stuff, right? They're just grinding all day long and trying to keep the lights on, and no real, I call myself a process champion, right? They have no champion for really figuring it out. Nowadays, you can go sign up for a Monday.com subscription for $10 a month, and you can play around with it and try to implement it, right? And a lot of people do that, and it doesn't really work out great, and you might spend years trying to figure it out. What I focus on is trying to help you understand, like, what is your goal? What are you really trying to accomplish? How do things get done now before you throw that technology so that it's effective, right? So that you get kind of that ROI as quickly as possible. Another thing that I focus on is the team. And I'll, I guess, get into that in a second. But so I kind of alluded to it before. Like when I say the word process, how does that make you feel? What do you think about process? Who loves it? Does anybody love it? Nan loves it. All right, that's why you're here. I love it. All right, so you are in the minority, I will tell you, that not most people don't love it. Most people think it's limiting. They think, oh, I can figure it out. We can do it. Like we don't want to be limited and in this structured box of doing things the same way. But really, it creates freedom, right? And I'll kind of explain in a second why. But here's some of the reasons why I think people cringe, even just definitions like ISO 9000. They call it a set of interrelated or interacting activities that use inputs to deliver an intended result. That sounds very complicated, complex, technical. The American Productivity and Quality Center says it's a set of activities and tasks that once completed will accomplish an organizational goal. That makes a little bit more sense, but still a little complicated. The definition I use really is just what must get done, right? A process are the steps and things that need to get done. I'll go back, actually. I skipped over on my slide. I don't know, is anybody familiar with the Kolbe action modes by any chance? Is anybody familiar with EOS? Do you know what EOS is? The Entrepreneurial Operating System. Look it up if you're a small business owner. It's a framework for running a business. It's something that I was introduced to in my former role, and being kind of a process-oriented mind makes a ton of sense, right? It's a framework, a cadence for activities, meetings, and the types of things that you should do to run a business. There are 6 components to EOS, one of them being process. And so I like to work with businesses that run EOS. They know they need to strengthen what they call their process component. And EOS advocates for simple, right? Like, make things simple. Don't make them too complicated. Focus on the 20% of the things that get you the 80% of the results, right? But the Kolbe action modes are something that's used kind of in the EOS community, and it's kind of like a DISC profile. If you're familiar with a DISC profile, it's how you kind of behave, in certain areas. So just to highlight mine, Fact Finder is the first one. I'm an 8. I like lots of data, information. I'm a slow decision maker sometimes because I want to get as much information as possible. The second one's follow through. I'm a 7, so that means I execute. I get things done. The green one is quick start, so I'm a 1. Because I'm an 8 fact finder, I don't make decisions as quickly. I don't get started as quickly because I want to have all the information. And the next one is implementer, so I'm kind of in the middle there, meaning like creating something new versus taking something and stabilizing it and tweaking it. So I'm more on the stabilized, tweaking side, although I've done a lot of creating stuff new myself also. All right, so process usually makes folks cringe a little bit. They don't love it, but really it's those simple steps, and I advocate for high level, right? Like, you don't have to have this giant diagram or this 10-page manual of things that need to get done, right? Because people aren't going to look at it. They're not going to read that 10-page manual. You want to make it simple. So one of the things that I advocate and teach with my clients is something I call the operational momentum arc. And if you own a business, you think about kind of how small businesses start, right? They start in this chaos. You can't see my pointer, but they start in this chaos kind of quadrant, right? You've got one person, a couple people, they're just really winging it, right? They're kind of figuring stuff out as they go. They might pivot. Their business might change a lot in the first couple of years as they figure out the market. And they're just really figuring things out. And things get chaotic, right? There's always fires. There's always something to do. And typically, as a business grows, they move to the right, to what I call the hero trap, right? You hire someone that you like, you trust, that it's going to do a great job for you, right? But they're a hero, right? They're the hero in your business. You and them are their hero. Or you have a couple heroes, right? You kind of create departments or people responsible for the finances, responsible for sales, right? And those are your heroes. But the problem there is you don't have any structure, right? You've kind of built your business on heroes. And you're one unfortunate bus accident away from sliding all the way back to chaos, right? That hero leaves. You have an argument with that hero, right? You talk about founders and partners having arguments and splitting businesses, right? You have an issue with that hero and you fall right back to chaos. So then what happens next is, well, I'm not going to do that again, right? So I'm going to document all my processes, and you go straight up to what I call process prison. I was just meeting with a founder a couple of weeks ago who's early stage in his business, and he showed me he's got a lot of great stuff. It's a giant wall of text. It's nice on a nice visual board, but it's a giant wall of text. And he made a comment, and he was like, yeah, when I show it to my staff, they're like, ah. And I'm like, well, that tells you something, right? I mean, they're not going to look at it. You might be able to force it down their throat one day in a meeting, but they're not going to use it. So process prison, people want agency and autonomy over their jobs, right? They want to be able to know what the expectations are, but work within the boundaries of where you give them. So you don't want to overdo it is the point, right? Process prison makes people feel micromanaged, makes them feel like they always got to check something, so it actually slows you down when you have to check and make sure you're doing the right thing every single time. So the goal to move up the operational momentum arc is to move a little bit up at a time and then a little bit to the right, right? So you put a little bit of structure and process in place. You document one thing, like the most important thing. Maybe it's sales. You document one thing and you do it at a high level, and then you let the team use it, and they figure it out along the way too. They'll say, all right, well, this kind of works, or why are we doing it this way, right? And they'll figure it out, and you'll refine it, and that starts to build trust, right? And then you do it again. You add it a little bit more, and that starts to build trust. And you start, as kind of like a step, you step up into the right each time, and you eventually get into a place where, you don't have 50-page manuals, but you have visualizations. You do quarterly meetings, right, where you're reviewing the state of the company, goals, annual goals, quarterly goals, and you're looking at your processes and saying, all right, I understand why we're doing this. I understand the results we're expected to get. Are we meeting them? We refine them a little bit, but we don't just go crazy, because people are just going to ignore it if you'd write, 100-page books. So this is something that I really kind of teach my clients, like a little bit at a time. Small steps really add up along the way. And again, it's the 20% most important things that drive 80% of your results. You don't have to document everything. So one of the things that we do, how we kind of deliver that service for our clients, is through a 5-stage kind of framework we call SCALE. The first one, strategize, is like an initial consult. We'll take a look at what you already have, right? So take a look at what you already have, audit them, make sure they're the most important things. Like, I might like to document my bookkeeping, but I do it maybe once a month. Like, it's not the most important thing. I really should have my sales process down, because that's what's driving growth, right? We interview the process owner. So depending on the size of the business, right? I work with small. I worked with a landscaper last month. That's 3 people. I worked with a 50-person accounting and HR firm. So a lot of times you might have people who own processes in different functional units. So you interview those folks, really get a sense for what's actually happening versus what you as a founder might think is happening, because a lot of times those things are very different. And then we come up with a plan, right? The next stage, we execute that plan, which is a lot of observing and following up, right? Like really sit down with intention and think about what is your team doing? Why are they doing it? Are they doing it wrong? Are they doing it different than you would expect, but it actually works? What are the results that you're getting from it? And what are the results that you're expecting? And really sit down and ask kind of those questions. And a lot of times I find an outside consultant or an outside perspective gets you a little bit more truth than a founder asking those questions. So we plan kind of that discovery session and who we're going to talk to. One other kind of often overlooked, very simple thing that I advocate for is what I call a process team matrix. It's super simple. It's, the process and who has a part in the process, just so that you identify, if you make a change to something, who do you need to communicate to? Communication is the biggest challenge, right? I hear it all the time, right? You make a change here, but we forgot to tell this person, and it doesn't work for this person. Or this person's just not happy that you didn't communicate with them or that you didn't get their input, right? So creating that also gives you a sense for if you are implementing systems or technology, right? Permissions and who needs access to what. So I've always got that kind of technology mindset in my back pocket also. The middle phase, assemble, that's really observing and following up, right? So observing, taking a look, kind of documenting what happens now, and then trying to simplify. I mean, one of the biggest goals is simplifying, right? Again, you want your team to understand what needs to be done, the major steps, and why, and what the result is, what the expected result is. So simplifying is important because they're not going to look at it all the time. They need to kind of know it. We format and package it, right? So a lot of times, depending on the client, it will be a different system or a different space. The landscaper I mentioned, Google Doc, documented his whole playbook on how he runs his business in one Google Doc. The accounting company that I mentioned, SharePoint site, centralized with like routed workflows to different process owners, bigger business, right? Bigger kind of operation. And we'll decide the format and how we package kind of those processes and that documentation. We'll actually package it. And then again, another really important part that sometimes gets missed is defining metrics and measures, right? Like, how do you measure it? How do you know whether it's working or not? And are you intentionally, managing it, right? Or are you just kind of putting it together and letting it happen, right? That's where EOS comes in, right? Again, I would highly recommend you read, there's a book called What the Heck is EOS? Or the book Traction is what EOS was originally kind of based off of. Take a look at them. They talk a lot about metrics and measurement, and you use a scorecard and you measure kind of all of the key kind of indicators, but again, not overcomplicate it. 10, simplify it, the most important. But then you tie those processes back to those measures, right, so that you can know whether they're effective or not, and if you need to tweak them. The last part of this phase is training, right? So like if we're changing processes for a team, we'll facilitate training, right? Again, often overlooked, right? But even a simple, 30-minute session to kind of run through something gives folks, a sense for what you're expecting. It gets everybody on the same page, right? I mean, you got to have everybody on the same page and not have kind of rogue people just going and doing whatever they want to at the same time. The last phase is an ongoing phase of the framework. It's evolve, right? So technology changes. I mean, we're in an age of huge AI, right? Changes and things like that. You've got to always be paying attention, right? I've worked with a law firm where they had an employee who did scheduling for the law firm. That employee had been with the company for 25 years or more, retired. It was all in her head, right? But they haven't changed the process in 25 years. So we were able to automate some things with court dates and things like that, there's really not a lot of decision making happening. The court tells you when you got to be there and you got to be there, right? So, taking a look at your processes on a regular basis, at least annually, if not quarterly, to see if tweaks are needed or changes are needed. So that's kind of how I deliver the service for my clients. And again, that's a lot with clients who have nothing. There are lots of clients who are in lots of different stages of their business. They might need just a little bit of coaching. They might need one particular process to have a fresh set of eyes and kind of tweak. So it all depends on the stage that the business is in. All of this sounds great. Like, I love this stuff. But, does it really work, right? We could document a whole bunch of things and nothing happens. It just goes and sits on a shelf, right? And nobody looks at it. So you've got to have a culture of really kind of reviewing it and trying to, that's why keeping it simple is important, right? Because the simpler it is, the more people will get on board with it. If you make it complex, they're just going to turn off. But obviously, it does work, right? If anybody's read the Checklist Manifesto, it's about creating checklists, right? Simple checklists. In the operating room, 37% drop in complications and 47% drop in deaths, when they started implementing a checklist. I mean, we all kind of know that they use checklists in the operating room now, but they didn't, when this happened. In aviation, right? Flight control, flying planes, all use checklists. Construction, managing lots of different subcontractors in different parts of buildings, and lots of checklists. The Ritz-Carlton $2,000 rule, if you've ever heard of that. If you've ever, there's a book called Excellence Wins by, I'm drawing a blank, I forget what his last name is. But he was the CEO of Ritz-Carlton and implemented this rule. The book, Excellence Wins, is all about customer service. It's a really good book to read. But every employee is empowered to solve a customer problem up to $2,000, right? So if I'm at a Ritz-Carlton and I drop my laptop in the pool and I have a big presentation tomorrow, an employee can go to Best Buy and get me a laptop right now, right? That's a process and a procedure that they put in place. And it's a huge, it's that customer service that is providing, why the Ritz-Carlton as that hospitality and customer service is because of that. And then exit valuation, right? Every owner knows that there is an eventual exit, right? Whether it's a transition, whether it's selling. But 80% of businesses under $1 million never sell. And that number might even be higher now. In kind of the exit planning industry, a documented playbook is worth a half a turn on the valuation. And so what that means, right, if you have $1 million business and seller's discretionary earnings is $200,000, you might get 2.5 times that offered to buy your business. But if you have a documented playbook, it goes up a half a turn. That's $100,000 in your pocket for spending an hour a week, for a month or two to just document your major processes, right? Because you can hand that playbook over to a buyer and they can immediately operate your business, right? Bonus with that is that if you do that, right, you're getting yourself out of the weeds. You don't have to do everything. You can delegate. You're moving up and to the right on that arc, and you're likely increasing your SDE, right, because you're becoming more effective as a business. So really, the results speak for themselves. They're hard to prove unless you do them, but they're there. Believe me, they are. A couple of examples. I mentioned kind of a lot of them already, but what I do, I coach, I consult, I document. We visualize, we take a look at how things are done and we refine. We look at tools you're using and try to maximize kind of the existing tools you already have. This is a hotel management company. This is what in EOS they call his proven process, which is essentially your sales process. It's getting a buyer to commit and all the things that happen for him to take on managing a property for a hotel owner. This one is like a process map of 3 different people and the steps they have in that accounting firm that I mentioned, how they process monthly accounting for their clients, a simple checklist on making sure you do your monthly bookkeeping or whatever it is, right? I try to visualize. I think visualization is important. It's when your team looks at it, it's a quicker way. When someone looks at a giant wall of text, they just immediately, from a cognitive perspective, it seems overwhelming. When you see kind of, some of these look overwhelming too. I mean, some of these do get big, and we try to simplify them as much as we can. But a visualization, people learn differently, right? So a visualization kind of helps see it and really think about the different steps and the different folks involved. So I think that is all I had. Again, I mean, I advocate for being intentional about it, right? And it doesn't take a lot of time. If you take a little bit, you spend 1 hour, even a month, just sitting down and looking at how the most important thing you do gets done. Even just make an outline. And then you start to think about it and you say, all right, well, John and Bob both do these things, but they're kind of duplicating their effort. Why are they both doing this? Maybe we could streamline it. You kind of get the juices flowing. and you're kind of on your way to improving how things get done. So I guess that's all I have. Do you guys have any questions?
How have you been incorporating AI into your process improvement?
Yeah, a little at a time. Again, my background is in technology. I use it myself all the time. I advocate for making sure you understand what you're trying to do before you just throw it at it, right? So I'm always, let's figure out what's the goal, how you intend to use it, who you intend to use it. Data safety is important, right, in how you're using it. But as an example, I work with a law firm. They huge like medical records, right? They review medical records. Data safety concerns, right? I mean, you obviously have to make sure that you're protecting that data, but AI can sift through a 1,500-page medical record a lot faster than an attorney can. So that's one example. Strategizing, even like using it with smaller stage businesses where they don't really have myself even, right? Like I use it to strategize, right? To come up with, be my, almost like my co-partner, right? And let me bounce ideas off of it. Let me propose to you how I'm going to approach a market or what I'm going to do for a marketing campaign, and, help me poke holes in it. So yeah, I mean, lots of different ways like that, but I am always an advocate for, don't just start using it. It's kind of counterintuitive because you want to start using it, right? You don't want to not use it, but think about what you're trying to accomplish and start small and simple.
Sensible.
Yeah.
I have a question. Great presentation. Thank you. What's your recommendation for having an audit of one of your clients? You touched on it briefly. You said you look at maybe annually, but why should if it's a client of yours, you checking on them quarterly, biannually?
Yeah. So
they can correct any mistakes or
yeah.
any recommendation not being correct.
Yeah. So I recommend they look at it quarterly. So every 90 days. So again, I work a lot with businesses that run EOS. They run a quarterly meeting cadence. And so I advocate for, as part of that quarterly meeting, that they build in process review. And so, taking a look at it, and a lot of times they might not tweak it, right? They might look at, and they might have 10 processes documented. They don't have every step of everything that they do. But they might take a look at it every 90 days. If I try to advocate for them doing it themselves, I'm happy to help if they need, a lot of times they need someone to hold them accountable, right? To make sure that they do it, and I'm happy to do that. But I like to recommend that they take it on themselves, and they have, depending on the size of the company, right? The owner of the process is responsible for reviewing every 90 days. I mentioned the accounting firm that I've been working with. So we built a SharePoint system where the process has, the last date that it was reviewed, and there's an automation 90 days where it will remind the process owner that it's time to review it again. So yeah, I mean, that's my recommendation, is every 90 days. If you're small, right, and you're kind of doing a lot of things yourself, it doesn't probably have to be done every 90 days, maybe annually at the minimum. But a larger business where you've got teams working on things, right, stuff starts to drift, right? People, they find a workaround and it starts to drift. They don't communicate. And so a 90-day review is what I advocate for. Mm-hmm.
All right, I really thank you very much. I really like the presentation. It's great. I teach at University of Hartford.
Okay.
So St. Joe's. And,
yeah.
And the academic world, I was very interested in that aspect of your background as well. I've noticed that it is technological infrastructure is in shambles.
Yeah.
Across academia at large. I mean, you have like a Gleason, this massive monster, $820 million creature that gives slices, thin sliced sausage products that are not really, working. So it's just interesting. What hasn't happened process-wise is in academia, they haven't really internalized that software development position.
Yeah.
There's an IT person. There's no development person.
Yeah.
To build the systems for them. They haven't gotten to that mindset yet. It's surprising.
Yeah. I think it's different in different places. So when I started as a computer programmer, and we did have a couple of software development folks, and we did development. So, I was there for 12 years, and technology changes quite a bit in 12 years, and even just philosophy, right? So when I started, there was a best of breed philosophy where you found the best product for the department. So financial aid had its own product, right? The bursar's office had its own product. Security had its own product, and everybody had their own product, right? And then the philosophy changed to, let's find one integrated system. It's easier to manage from a technical perspective because you have one system, you have one database, all the data's in that one, architecture platform. But it's the companies that sell that software, like Ellucian has evolved over time. It was, SCT a long time ago. SunGard, I think, bought it, and those might be backwards, but eventually became Ellucian, and that was a product that I mentioned. So we implemented it was a SunGard product at the time, where they tried to build a next generation kind of system, and it just didn't get enough sales, and they squashed it, and they fall back on their existing systems that's been around for probably 30, 40 years. And I think the challenge in higher ed is that there's so many universities and institutions using it, it's not going to go away, and the software companies have just been bolting things on as opposed to building a native, modern technology solution.
Well, that should change now, right?
Yeah. Well, I think, yeah.
Response, you probably replicate everything you need with a dedicated two-person team.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I agree. All of it's going to change. All of software systems are going to change, right? It's all about the data now, right? Like, how is the data structured? That's the challenge we saw in my former role as we started kind of rolling out things, AI type things with a certain client, where it's about structured data, right? AI needs to kind of see the structured data, and if you kind of got it all over the place, you got to clean it up in order to be able to use it. So that is the next kind of big challenge from a technology perspective, really for all businesses. But yeah, higher ed technology has historically been kind of slower to kind of catch up. But I think it is different in different places. I think it all kind of depends.
I'm not saying it's like, I don't want to say anything bigger. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
My cousins are in many different universities, I have family in academia. I'm just constant stories I'm hearing from everybody.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing with Ellucian itself, it's just like, what an opportunity, what an industry that's going to be disrupted.
Yeah.
And it's inevitable.
Yep.
The ed tech
Yep.
space.
Yep. Absolutely.
But now you're going to have all these. But what's interesting to me is you're going to have all these smaller entities, and there's no legitimacy of that big entity that institution needs. It's not a legitimacy crisis.
Yeah.
Even though you have a good solution from a small company.
Yeah.
How are you going to convince the board or whatever?
Yeah.
You're like, okay, let's trust this. Let's trust change.
And it's like that with everything, right? Think about hiring, right? There's I'll call it an old school mentality, right? Where, education and degrees were more important than skills. And that's even shifting now, right? With hiring workforce, right? A lot of small businesses in particular are placing a premium on skills, right? Skills and experience, not necessarily education. So, I think that legitimacy kind of problem, is relevant in lots of different aspects of business, university, higher education, lots of different things. Yeah, no, thanks for the question. Any other?
Questions? Well, thank you, Joe. How as a community can we help you?
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to be here and to kind of, present and kind of share the stuff that I'm kind of passionate about, for small businesses. Really, I'm looking to just build a community, right, to kind of do some networking. And I'm a solopreneur, right? I don't have a big business. It's just kind of me, right? Maybe eventually, might grow into a couple of people. But really, I'm just looking to make connections and to kind of, share what I know and kind of help people learn and really advocate for taking a look at how things get done. And, if you need some help, right, ask somebody for help. There are lots of people who can help. And so really, it's about building connections and community for me.
Absolutely. So you're part of our community now and an honored part of our community, and so I want to give you a gift for,
Thank you.
for coming and being a presenter today. Thank you
Yeah,
very much.
thanks.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Come back.
Yeah.
Be part of our ongoing growth as the Young Cups Greater Hartford.
Sounds good.
Stay for some conversation and coffee, you know? Must be the holiday. It's the holiday.